Hello, 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 and welcome to Pixel Chatter number 21. Pixel Chatter turns 21, that's pretty cool. Alright, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody if you're in the chat box. Let us know where you are, what you're up to. What is the weather like where you are? Already been in the live chat with Handy Parts. He came in and said he was first. Grab that first spot. All right, big show today. Look, plenty to cover. A few images to critique as normal. Looking forward to that. A couple of other things I want to run through as well. Plus, we have our first viewer kit coming in. Well, actually, I've got a few viewer kits coming in. I'll talk about that in a second. But I asked a couple of episodes, or maybe last episode, if you could shoot in a picture of your kit to share with a bit of a description. And I've got that here as well. And we've got a Lightroom tip, which I think everyone is going to enjoy. All right, who we got in there? Damon Force Gaming, hi. Chance, good morning. Jeff, good morning. Spanner, good morning. Good morning, Susan. Excellent. Good day in Melbourne, is it? Well, it's a good day here in Sydney, and of course, drinking from the beautiful Pixel Chatter mug. Thank you to Scott. Alrighty. All right, let's get stuck into things. The first thing I wanted to cover off, in fact, was that I had a couple of people email me and ask me, and it's sort of has happened a few times, if they wanted to send me something, how they do it. So I've actually put my P.o.Box in the description if you want to send something through. I don't know if you can see behind me here where this picture is. The Canon lenses have gone, sold on eBay. I'm going to clean that up. Got a few things happening, moving my son downstairs, etc, etc. And the idea is I'm going to put a world map up there. And what I want to do is get you guys sending in some stickers from where you are, and we'll put them up on the world map, and we'll start to build a bit of a beautiful a map of where everybody in the world is watching from. Because I know we've got people from everywhere. When we have a look in and see where everyone's from, lots of people in Australia and in the USA and the UK, and then we've got Norway, and we've got so people everywhere, which is really cool. Alrighty, so yeah, that's in the description now. I think I put it in there. Let me just double check. But it's a P.o.Box. Yes, it is. It's in there now. So if you're one of those people who said you wanted to send something in, you never know. Maybe I could do like a mail time segment. If you want to send anything cool in. Alrighty, good to see more people popping in. Another reminder as well is Tassie Tour. We still have a couple of spots left. It is filling. So if you were thinking of coming, if you're one of those people who was umming and ahhing, or you had to check with the boss, your boss that is, then that Tassie Tour is just about full. If you want to grab a spot, you need to go to the link that's in the description below. The early bird pricing is over. But there's still a couple of spots left, and I'd love to see you there. Come and hang out with us in Tassie, where we go and photograph, Cradle Mountain and all the beautiful stuff in Tasmania. A couple of spots left. Okay. All right, let's get stuck into things. I'll quickly check the chat box, and then I'll come across, and we're going to have a look at our first viewer kit that I've had sent in, and I'll give you some points and tips on the best way to send those in to me. Alrighty, Christian DeBerg, 10:30 p.m. Are you going to take the dogs out for a walk after the show? Wow. G'day, Boz Bever. You're in time, yes. From South where? From South. South Pole? I don't know where you're from. South Pole. Philip, Northern Ireland. G'day, Philip. You can see that that's probably where, my ancestors are from. Africa. Excellent. Africa. Sunday morning so far. Spanner says, how was the trip to Newcastle? I didn't end up going up there for photography in the end. Things changed. I had to go up there for business anyway, but I didn't take my photography kit. So, yeah, unfortunately, there was no vlogging from up there. But my plan is to get back up there. It's good because it's so close to home. So it's just a matter of working that out. All right, let's jump straight into having a look at a viewer shot kit. Now, I don't know if you remember what I said was in a couple of episodes ago, I said, send in your kit. Let's have a look at what everyone shoots with. so we can get a feel for what sort of kits we have out there. And it sort of stemmed from the fact that my kit had been featured on a site called ShotKit. And so I said, take a photo of your kit and send it in. Now, some of you sent me individual photos of each part of your kit, so it makes it a little bit too difficult for me to show on this show because I've got to load a lot of photos in. So this is a good example of what I'm after. This is Anthony Younghusband's kit. I don't know if Anthony's in the chat box this morning, but this is his kit. I love these Nissi filter cases. They've really got that right, haven't they? If you're wondering which cases they are, that's Nissi Filters kits. And so what's in his, he uses a Lower Pro Protastic 350 AW bag. He's got a Canon 80D there. He's got a 10 to 18, 18 to 35, and a 50 to 100, which is really a good spread of lenses, isn't it? So, it's important that when you're thinking about what lens to get next, try and cover different focal lenses, which he's done there. And then those filter kits that you can see there are Nissi filter kits. So they're pretty cool. They're very nice, aren't they? Very nice bags. Or leather cases, I should say. And so he's got himself the 100mm a CPL, and then it's called the Nissi 100mm Advanced Filter Kit. A few other bits and pieces in there like dust blowers, cleaning cloths, etc., etc. And then he said he's got a few other items he's in his bag all the time. Shutter release, intervalometer, cheap eBay one, lens cleaning kit. I mean, here's a few things that are cool. Ibuprofen, so in case you get a haircut, a headache, I mean. Headlamp, small pen torch, $50 cash. Always stick that in. That's probably a good idea in case something happens. All sorts of stuff. And he said he mainly uses a Manfrotto tripod, the O55 X Pro 3, which is the one that I had before, the really right stuff. It's actually quite a good tripod. So there you go. Thanks, Anthony, for sending that in. If you want to send your kit in and have it on the show, we'd love to see it. Just email it to me. The email address is down below. Or you can send it as an attachment in the Facebook Messenger system on the On Three Legs page on my Facebook page. That'll do as well. Don't mind either way. But I'd love to see your kit, and we'll share it with everybody. But interesting to see what everybody shoots with. And I think it's so important, I say it all the time, it's not about your gear. In fact, I was thinking about doing, I don't know if you've seen that Digital Rev TV. Go and check that out if you haven't. Digital Rev TV. It's sort of fallen apart now, but a few years ago it was going really strong, and there's this fella called Kai Wong, and what he would do is, he was the host of the show, he would get a pro photographer and give them a cheap camera and send them out on a challenge. And I was thinking that rather than do a really cheap camera, I was thinking about trying to buy something on eBay under, I don't know, a few $100 with a lens, and go out and do some shots with that, and just show you that you don't need a lot of kit to get good shots, because that would be a bit of fun. Alrighty. Anthony, yes, that was your kit. Thank you for sending that in, mate. Good to see. Yeah, so if you want to send your kit in, do it like that. Like I said, it's not all about what you shoot with, it's how you shoot with it that I think matters most. Photography Australis, yes, you're late. I'm good. Chance. Kai is nuts, yes. He is nuts. It's a bit of fun though, isn't it? So, always good to do. Alright, so, quick plug for my Facebook and Lightroom. As I said, if you want to shoot me anything, you can do it through the facebook.com On Three Legs Facebook page with the messenger service. I check them relatively quickly, like every, I don't go crazy. I'm not a big fan of being ransomed to notifications on Facebook, so I don't tend to have the notifications on, but you can send me messages there and I should get them. Alright, so we're going to jump straight into a Lightroom tip. Let me go to... jump in here. Alrighty. What a lot of people have asked me. Okay, we're going to share my screen. Alright. So what a lot of people have asked me, and I thought that I would share with you today, is how to put your logo into Lightroom. Now, you might not have a logo, but you may have something you'd like to put in there. Now, if you can look in the top left-hand corner, I've got my logo up there, and it's actually really simple to do. Now, if you don't have a logo, Adobe lets you type in something like your name, or you could put in there your name followed by the word photography. And especially if you're showing clients, maybe you're showing clients photos or something, just gives that little bit more of a professional look if you want to have your logo in there. Since I was asked by a few people, how did you get your logo in there, Ben? I thought I would show you. Now, it's what's called the vanity plate feature. And with this feature, you can add your own logo or an image, or you can type something in. All you've got to do is you go to Lightroom up here, where it says Lightroom. Come down to where it says Identity Plate Setup. And then you'll see that you choose from here what you want it to be. I have personalized choose, and then I use a graphical identity plate. And what I had to do was just upload an image. If you click on use a styled text identity plate, well, then you can type in something like, this, and then you can start styling it with the all the different functions inside of. I'm going to highlight it, just like you would in any word processing program. So you can go through and select different things, select the different fonts. You can pick whatever it is you like, and then when you're done, you can select color as well. Maybe you want it to be red. And then you can see it starts to come together. I think you got to do your font size first. Why isn't it the font size? Oh, it does it later. It does actually adjust it later. Yeah. So you can go through and do that. I'm going to cancel that because I don't want to change mine. But very simple to do. And then you just hit the OK button. And before you know it, up here, you'll have your own personalized set going up there at the top. As I type it in, it's going in. So you can start doing that, and you can do whatever you like. The other thing you can do is you can change the fonts and size of the fonts for the menu. So if you want a bigger menu or something like that, you want to change the fonts, you want to change the colors. So they do different things on hover over, etc. You can actually change all of that in here, which is kind of cool. And a lot of people don't realize you can do that. So there you go. That's this week's Lightroom tip. It's called Lightroom Vanity Settings. Lightroom Vanity Settings. And yeah, very cool. All right, so that's the tip for today. What's going on in the chat box? Well, off to the Remembrance Day service, lest we forget. Yes, very important, isn't it? That we remember those. What else we got here? Mobile this morning. Yes, cool. You're going as well. Damon Force, I've taken better shots with my Galaxy S8 Plus and edited in Lightroom than some people I know with DSLRs. Yeah. Yeah, it happens, doesn't it? So I think a lot of people get hung up on gear. But I definitely want to do like a vlog where I'm going to go out with something cheap. I was even thinking about using I don't know how I'm going to do it, because I use a Canon G7X for the video. That's what's on the end of my GorillaPod filming when I'm vlogging. But it's a good example of a point and shoot that has manual settings that you could get some great shots with, and I have got some great shots with it. So I'm just thinking about how I could do it, because everyone gets so hung up on gear, and don't need to be. Okay, let's get stuck straight into the critiques for today. I've got 3 people have sent me in their critiques. And I encourage you, if I can get, I'm running low on critique images. If you want to send some in, please feel comfortable sending them in. What I say doesn't mean you're wrong or I'm right. It's all about just helping each other to take a better photo. I know it can be a little bit daunting, but the show won't be the show without pictures to look at. So if you want to shoot me in 3 images, it's ben@on3legs.com. Send those pictures in, and I will critique them live here on the show. And yeah, I would love to. Now this week we've got 3 images. The first one is from Daniel Korsland, who's been a great contributor to Pixel Chatter. He's over in Norway, and he gets out and takes photos in all sorts of weather. And I like this one. He does a lot in the portrait mode, and it's a good example of how you can, on an overcast day, still get out there and take some photos. The second one is Brian Willard, who's sent in quite a few images as well. Thanks, Brian. We're going to have a look at this one, which is Under the Jetty. I'd say that we saw the other week. And I love jetties, so we're going to do that one. And then the third one is by Dave Fewtrell, who's our guy that was on the Central Coast moving up to Townsville. And he's got this, I'd say, it's a beautiful sunrise on the Central Coast with the pelican in a rock pool. So we'll come back to that and have another look at that in a second. So let's jump straight into these and start critiquing. So the first one here by Daniel Korslund. I'm not a big fan of portrait unless there's no choice for me. But sometimes it just works, and I know I've done it myself. But it usually takes something away from a landscape image because we want to see width. We want to see what's either side. Unless there's a real particular reason you're doing it because you need to fit something in up the top here maybe, or you just got to be really careful when you start shooting things in portrait to make sure that you've got a good reason for it. Now, if we have a look at this image here, it's f11, and it's 69 seconds. So my guessing is that he had a filter on of some sort. So I'm just taking a sip out of the Pixel Chatter mug. My guess he would have had a filter of some sort because 69 seconds is just over a minute. At f11, shot at 16mm with a 16 to 35mm f4 Nikon lens. Great lens on a Nikon D610. Really, cool camera. One of the later model Nikons. And ISO 100, so the lowest ISO he could go. Now, a couple of cool things going on here. First of all, if you have a look in close, it's in pretty good focus up front here. And that goes out to this point here. So the focusing, and this is really critical if you're going to shoot foreground that is really close, you need to make sure the focus here is spot on. And I know that focus stacking is a more complex sort of technical thing to do, and you can do that. But if you just think through your shot, you could focus easily, this sort of a shot, easily say you're in focus the whole way through. It's not 100% sharp down in the foreground. It's not 100% sharp up here on the rock to the left there. This is where the focus point is. It's definitely sharp in here. But sharp enough that you get away with it. It works. Definitely works. And, it's interesting, so which is cool. It's always good to get interesting. And with a longer exposure, all the water is smoothed right out. And the other thing that does is because it smooths the water out, it lets you expose what's under the water. So it's got this really cool, it's like to me it looks like epoxy whenever I do this. I don't know if you've ever seen those things where they epoxy over the rock or in something, in wood, and you can see through it really clearly. That's what this sort of looks like to me. Sort of has that epoxy effect. And I love doing that long exposure effect when I'm doing this. All right, so from a composition point of view, I would probably have preferred landscape because I have a feeling there's a couple of really nice leading lines going in, and the sky up the top, it's sort of, when you're doing a long exposure with clouds, if there's a lot of cloud, you're going to just end up with this sort of grey, block at the top rather than any dynamic movement. So you can see that the dynamic movement sort of stops about 20% of the way up the clouds, and then it just turns into grey fuzz. So for me, I probably would have done something in landscape and cropped a bit higher. But anyway, that's okay. The leading lines are there, which is cool. So you can see the leading lines, but the leading lines are leading us just to not much. A little bit of cloud on the horizon, but there's not much there to see. I think from a post-processing point of view, it's a little bit flat as well. There's a few questions coming in. Let me go and see what they are. Chance says, wife sending in 3 soon. Awesome. Fantastic. It's great to see you guys getting into photography together, Chance. Love it. How do I want them, RAW or is it JPEG's fine, mate. I like getting JPEG. RAW would be way too big. The live stream can't handle too much, unfortunately. So if you shoot them into me, sort of, you can see this one here is a JPEG. It's 6,000 on the longest edge, and the bigger you can send them in, the better it's going to be for me to be able to zoom right in, but it's the harder it is for me to open them up and work on them in the live stream. So I say to you, try and keep the longest edge to 3,000 or 4,000 pixels, and then you'll be fine. And send me 3, just JPEGs is fine. That works well. Now Kathleen's saying, would I have used a CPL as well? Look, you could. There's not a huge amount of reflection happening here because there's not a lot of light, but you could try it. A CPL is one of those things you've got to put on and just see what it does, and see if you like the effect. It would have probably changed things a little bit. Maybe made the rocks, the colours in the rocks pop out a little bit more. Maybe make the water a little bit clearer because there is a little bit of reflection on top of the water. Maybe he did use a CPL. Maybe it was a lot worse. Who knows? It's one of the things that we can't see, unfortunately. But yeah, if you use your big stopper and a CPL, as long as you've got the 2 rails on your filter holder, you'll be fine. So I would have probably gone with a different crop. So let's jump in the develop module and let's just apply a couple of small changes to this image. You'll see I'm getting the winding wheel because it is a bigger image, but I'll do my best here. So to me, there's an imbalance in the light, and this is something that is not hard to fix. Like, I don't know if you can see how bright it is in the middle. You got 2 ways. You can drop the highlights, but if you want that sort of it's like a center focus or a center vignette type effect. If you want that effect, then maybe just drop the exposure down a tad because it's just a little bit hot in the middle. Entirely up to you how you do it. I've just dropped that. You can see 0.45. It's only a small amount, but it just takes that heat out of the middle. I would also say it lacks a bit of depth. Now, depth comes from 2 things in Lightroom: contrast and clarity. And so I typically start with a little bit of contrast just to bring some depth into the image. I don't know if you can see, it's just subtle, but it's just enough. I'm going to go with +17. And I'm just going to pop that exposure just back up a little tad, about there. I'm going to also just increase the shadow slightly. There we go. Okay, so we're just making very fine adjustments. So that's the first bit of depth that I'll give it. Now, if these rocks are my main feature, I'm going to grab a brush and I'm going to bring the exposure back up. I'm going to increase the clarity up, and I'm just to 100. I'm going to grab my brush, as you can see there, and I'm going to brush over the rocks in the foreground. And the reason I do that is I really, really want to draw the eye to the detail in the rocks, and that's because it's the main feature. And maybe in between the rocks here, this water. By the way, if you do not have a CPL filter and you're shooting water, the clarity brush sort of gives you a similar effect. Not as good, but it'll sort of fix it slightly. Alright, my computer's having a bit of a hernia trying to process all of that. So we'll just let it finish processing. So this one's a bit big, this file, but that's alright. Now the other thing I think is the white balance is slightly cool, so I'm going to warm that up a tad. Still processing, have to wait. Come on, there we go. So I'd probably just warm it up just a tad, and then give it a little bit of vibrance. Let's see if we can get the colours to pop out a little bit more. Alright. I don't like the top at all, so I'm actually going to crop it in a bit. I'm going to keep the same sort of a perspective, but I'm going to crop it in a bit. I'm going to put that rock in the foreground, that second rock, on the rule of thirds. Just give you a bit of a... There we go. I think that looks a bit better. In fact, they're starting to look like mountains, aren't they, these rocks? It's kind of cool. Now, if I give you the before and after... Okay, that was the before, and that's the after. Okay, so you can see the depth that's come in. It's more dynamic. Then more of the detail on the rock. So to me, that's sort of what's going to make the difference. Now I think it's a bit green up the top there. in the clouds, and that can happen sometimes. So if you grab a filter, like a gradient filter, let's get rid of the clarity. There's a couple of things you can do. One that's really easy is you just desaturate it. See, when I desaturate, it pulls the greens out straight away. So that's one thing that you can do. The other thing you do is you can try using the tint slider, so moving the colours around a bit. So I can get rid of the green by going a bit to the right, as you can see. So it sort of fixes that up, and then I can decide if I want to warm it up, cool it down. There's also this dehaze does funny stuff as well. You can play with that as well. But that's sort of looking good. What happened there? I lost something. So one of my settings went. That's okay. So I think I'd be happy with that. Oh, that looks a bit better. So I've got the colours right. And then I would probably just add a top and bottom gradient. Oh, that's not gradient. This is gradient, Ben. What are you doing? And just drop the exposure slightly. And you've seen me do this before. This is like my top and bottom vignette I do. So, which is where I just set everything to 0, drop the exposure a little bit at the top, like so. Grab another one. So another new filter from the bottom. Hold down the shift key and that just keeps it nice and steady for you. And just drop the exposure down slightly at the bottom. And it just draws the eye in a bit. Like so. Let's have a look at the before and after. So that was before and that's after. So, you know, for me, it was missing a few things. And I think, on a grey day, you've got to try and find some foreground that's interesting. And so the reason I like this image is that the foreground is interesting in the fact that, got these really detailed rocks with all this, weird sort of stuff growing on it, a few shells and stuff. It looks good. So I would always go, make sure I bring that detail out if that's what I'm trying to do, because the sky wasn't interesting at all up here. As you can see, I've really taken the focus of that. I've put this rock on the intersection of the rule of thirds and made it all a bit better. It's a tough image. It's not the greatest location, but when you're on a rainy day and you want to just get out with your camera, why not have a play? I would also just do a bit of smot removal and get rid of anything that was a bit too distracting. I would probably remove whatever's up here on this horizon. I'd do it better than what I'm about to do it. But I'm not a fan of whatever that is. It's a bit distracting. So that'll do. It's rough, but it'll do. Just cleanse it up that little bit. Yeah. You could go through and just remove a few. Like there's this big white piece here is distracting my eye. Anything that sort of just really distracts your eye. If you want to, up to you, it's a personal thing, but I do it. If it's not my main part of my image, I just get rid of it and make it so you're not distracted by anything that's not important. And once again, let's have a look. Before and after. Before and after. Okay. Alrighty. So let's jump in the comments, see what you thought of that. That was my edit. Need the new Intel 8700K chip. Yeah, I don't know what's in mine. No idea. This is not very old. This was the top of the range iMac. Cost me like $4,000 something. So it's got plenty of grunt. I think the live streaming just takes too much out of the computer when you're live streaming and you're trying to process images at the same time. It just does. I mean, processing images takes a lot of work for a processor anyway, doesn't it? So, something in my Mac has just opened up that shouldn't have. Let me close that down. Okay. Alrighty. Bose Beaver. Yeah, Benny is also someone's fan of colour landscape images. Instagram is now stuffed with those desaturated, tone-splitted hipster pictures, rather boring. Yeah, look, I'm not a black and white fan at all. I believe colour. I mean, we see colour. Colour is an important thing, but it's very subjective. So I respect those that like black and white, but it's not my thing. I struggle with getting a black and white image that I like. And maybe it could be said that somebody who can take a great black and white photo is an awesome photographer, because if you don't rely on the colours, then maybe that makes you awesome. I don't know, because for me, I find that I always look for amazing colour, because I think that's, if you ever see somebody saying ooh or ah at a photo, I can tell you now, all the photos I stick up online, the ones that get the most comments and likes on any social media platform are the sunrise and sunsets that are epic. The nice colour. They always do. And the reason for that is because you don't see it every day. You do not see that colour every day. You're lucky to get 1 in 10 or 1 in 15 sunrises or sunsets. Probably 1 in 20 even, that are epic colour. And I think that's what makes them so special. So when you put the effort in, and you're there every morning, or you're there every night until the epic colour comes, it's an amazing thing. It certainly is. All right, just going to finish off this because it's going cold. I always leave it too long. How cool's that, eh? My own. Still stoked about that, Scott. Didn't expect that at all. Beautiful gift. Beautiful gift. All right. Kathleen says, agree, but still looks natural, no purple sky. Yes. John. Hey Ben, glad to finally make it to another live pixel. G'day John, good to have you here. Quick question, have you ever joined a photography club that does competitions? If so, have you ever run into folks who have an allergic reaction to post-processing your images? Yes. An allergic reaction to post-processing your images. Yes, I have. Funny story. Geez, I wonder if I can bring the image up. Let me see if I can find it in here. Let's see how good my catalogue is. Have I got it in here? I'm trying to think about where I would have this image. Yes, I know where it'll be. I entered a competition. I don't know, 5 years ago. I had a D700. And one of the rules of the competition was no HDR. Now, for those of you that know me well, you'll know that I have spent a fair bit of time mastering HDR and love it. Right? I've got nothing against HDR. I think the HDR haters are the ones that don't like the really over-processed stuff. And I understand that because it doesn't look good. Let me see if I can find my image. And I won this competition. And I never told them it was HDR, but it was. And so I've also judged photography competitions at photography clubs as well. I've been invited to be a judge. And I thought it was in this folder. Okay, maybe not. Maybe not. Let me have a look in this folder. Here it is. So I'm going to show you an image that... is this the final one? Hang on, I'll just find the final one because I've got a few versions. I think this might be the final one. Yeah, all right. Now, to me, it's obvious that it's HDR. Let me show you. All right, here we go. So this is one I call Sun-Kissed Bridge, and I was shooting with my 16 to 35mm into the sun with my D700. You can see the sun in behind the trees there. And, there's a few telltale signs that this is HDR. The back of the pylon, the tree, and all this grass is light, okay? Normally, that wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen. Yet I submitted this to, and you can see, this was in my early days of HDR. I wasn't even good at getting it right. You look at the top of the tree, there's a lot of the tree branches that are just silhouette, and then it comes into the light. So it's all a bit weird. I don't think this is my final image actually, because I can see some stuff on the concrete. Because this is in my processing folder. It says I've got a few in here. Have I got one where I've got all that removed? Anyway, gives you an idea. What's this one here? This one's got more junk on the file. Because I go through it. These are very time consuming. This took about 5 hours to process. Now, Tim says it's obviously HDR. Now, to me, it's obvious, right? But I submitted it to a photography club, a competition, and I won. And it strictly said in the instructions, no HDR. And I knew that. And it was a bit of a cheeky thing because there were so many people anti-HDR that I wanted to submit some HDR images to competitions and see what would happen. And I did it to several competitions that said no post-processing or HDR, and you know, it got amazing feedback. There was only a couple of groups that picked it up. And the final image wasn't as, this was a bit darker. I can't find the final one that I submitted. It'd be here somewhere. But yeah, it's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious that that's HDR. So, you know, when it comes to, I'm pretty sure I had it here, the file image. Anyway, when it comes to post-processing images and camera clubs, I find that, you know, if you think about a lot of those camera clubs, they've got an old DNA because, and a camera club is an old DNA, right? It's not something that's a, you know, all the young Gen X, Gen Y people are going to. It's something that people who have grown up with film are in. And so whenever I've presented at a lot of camera clubs, I get invited to do it, and quite often I go because it's fun to go out and meet other photographers, and like I said, I've judged a few competitions, and you know, I think it's all subjective, and that's the challenge with anything to do with art. It's subjective, right? How can someone say to you that post-processing is bad? It's like saying to Van Gogh that he used the wrong colours, or to Prohart that his colours were too vibrant, or, you know, like, it's a subjective thing. It's not up to, and that's why I think judging is really difficult. I think any competition that is judged should have at least 10 judges, and they should all have, I don't know, 10 different aspects they're judging on and rating out of 10 in their opinion. So, for example, you know, they should have composition, and then they'd rate that out of 10. Processing, rate that out of 10. You know, subject matter, if it was, because sometimes those competitions are based on a subject. You know, all of those things, I think, should then be judged by 10 people and then the score average. But most competitions aren't done that way. They've got a few judges, but never, I don't think, enough. And the judges all talk in a lot of cases. I think that's also skews the answers, because, you know, I just don't think it should be done that way. But anyway, so yeah, I have had a look at that. So you said you're looking at, what else we got here? John, so I'm looking at some clubs in my area and found they have very strict rules about what you're allowed to do for your image. Stuff like cloning things out are disallowed for competitions. How would they know, is what I'd say. How would they know? If you do a good job of it, they'll never know. That photo's got stuff cloned out of it, by the way. They just won't know. Susan's asking, has the radio filter changed since the upgrade? I actually haven't upgraded mine yet, so I'm yet to do that. I'll check that during the week and report back next week. How's that? Have I tried the Nikon 16mm fisheye for landscape? No, have not done that. I always love it when I see this message retracted. I wonder, did you make a spelling mistake or did you swear? I don't know. Got the Daily Double on Thursday. Sunrise at Coogee Baths and sunset at Lugano. Nice. What did I win? I can't remember exactly what. It was just some photography gear and a voucher for a photography shop. A lot of the competitions don't actually have much except for, you know, you win. They quite often don't have many prizes. The best one that I've won was the Australian weather calendar competition, where my Aurora shot ended up in the Australian weather calendar, which was cool. Once again, no prize money, and you know, they're just getting amazing images from 12 different photographers for a calendar that they sell. Oh, you do get, I think, 4 or 5 calendars, but that was kind of cool. And my images have been on a few calendars through competitions, but I'm not a big competition fan, by the way. So don't think that I go around entering competitions like mad, because I don't. It's not my personality type. I don't need that recognition for whatever reason. It's just never excited me. The work that goes into trying to enter competitions is frustrating, so I just don't do it. What annoys me is the fact that all those film cameras were post-processed. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they were. Post-processing is disallowed, you think, to level the playing field a bit? Yeah, maybe. But I would, yeah, I would do it. Do they ask for the raw images? No, they're not usually. Not usually. Maybe if you won and they were really, like if it was a big prize, like a $50,000 prize, they probably have a team of people that go through things with a fine tooth comb. But yeah. All right. Damon Force Gaming sent 3 images for critique. Awesome. Yeah, send your images in so I can critique them. All right, let's have a look at the next image. Let's jump straight into this one. Now, I love an under the jetty shot. You know, there's only one thing I love nearly as much as an on top of the jetty shot, and that's an under the jetty shot. This one's from Brian Willett, and I'm assuming it's the same jetty that we saw in one of his past shots. And one of the good things about this is when you you know, I used to love under the jetties. That were great for HDR, awesome for HDR, in fact, because they, you know, you've got that dynamic range happening where, as you can see, if you look just past this second pillar on the left, it's almost completely blown out. And in fact, if I go to the develop module, let's have a look and see. I can see by the histogram it's not, but it's very close to being blown out. In fact, the sky is going to be blown out first. And this is why the dynamic range of these cameras these days is amazing. And let me go back to the library. What did you shoot this with, Brian? He's got a D750, yeah. So good dynamic range. Shot with a 14 to 24mm lens. Amazing lens for lack of distortion. It really does a good job. ISO 100, shot at 14mm and f11 1/8 of a second. Now, what's going on here is that you know, once the sun comes up, if you want to still keep shooting towards the sun, sometimes you've got to find a way to creatively block it, which is what under a jetty does. One of the challenges you'll end up faced with is you could end up with nothing but a silhouette underneath. With the dynamic range of cameras these days, when I started shooting, I think I had a Nikon D70 when I started shooting digital. There was no way you could get away with a shot like this without bracketing and then doing some sort of blending or HDR afterwards. It just wouldn't work. It's where these days you can shoot a photo like this. You can shoot a photo like this, and you know, you jump into the develop module. And once you're in the develop module, you can simply just drop highlights, increase shadows, and you're going to end up with, you know, something that is very balanced in its dynamic range. I mean, this is now looking HDR because, of course, Brian's already processed it, and now I'm giving it a HDR look. But if you want the HDR look, you know, this is how easy it is to get in Lightroom these days. It's just amazing. Check this out. Like, just, I can give it the HDR look real quickly. Not that I'm saying this is what it needs to look like, but I'm just giving it that HDR look. Just drop the exposure a bit. You know, you can grunge it right up. Grunge it up if you want. Not that we want to. We don't want to do that. So I'm going to reset this back because we don't want it to look like this. Where's my reset? I want to reset. Okay, we'll just go back over here. But as you can see, I can quickly, there we go, take it back to where it was. Now and that's how quickly you can do it. I can see people over there asking more questions. Do I do my own sensor cleaning? Yes, I do. I did show that on one of the live videos, I think, from memory. I went through all of that. My camera can't handle HDR, reason for an upgrade. Like you need a reason. Everyone just does it anyway. Yeah, just bracket your shots. That's all you have to do. D3300, investing in glass fur. Yeah, look, up to you how you do it. All right, let's have a look at this photo. So ISO 100, 14mm, f11, 1/8 of a second. All that's good. Composition wise, I like it. Probably a little bit of a crooked horizon. Just watch your horizons. Easy to get up, but if you have a look, if it's just slightly out, so I'm just going to do this, and that's what it should be. is there. Now there's actually a little auto button here. If I press the auto button and see what it does. Oh, it's horrible. It quite often doesn't do a very good job. I don't know what it uses to try and level things up, but as you can see, it did a terrible job. It made it worse. Alright, so that's the horizon straighten. So just keep an eye on your horizons. It was out by, half a degree or so, which is just enough to make it look a bit crazy. You can see this highlight here in between these two pillars. I would be tempted to do something about that. I don't know what. I'll come back to that in a second. But the processing is good. Brian's processing is definitely getting better. I can see someone's walked their dog through here, which is kind of cool. Some footprints. It's a pity they had shoes on. It'd be nice if there was bare human footprints and then the dog prints next to it, wouldn't it? For me, I probably would have got a tad closer in, and I'll show you what I mean, just so you get a feel for it. I probably would have got a bit closer into those pylons. Something. Let's see if I can try and keep the same perspective roughly. I would have done something like that. Okay, that's just my personal preference, because there's not a lot in that foreground there. Like if I undo that crop, there's not a lot in that foreground. Let me just... Yep. There's not a lot. The only other thing, if this rock was interesting, maybe you should get down lower and shoot that rock into it as a leading line. But otherwise, there's not a lot of interest in the foreground. So I would definitely try and get closer. And the good thing with that lens, if you got really close to these pylons, it would actually work quite well. Let's just see what I can do here. Something a little bit less traditional, like a square crop. Yeah, look at that. That's kind of cool. I don't know what this is over here. What is this on the pylon that's distracting me? What is that? I don't know. Is that like a cicada or something? Or I'm going to get rid of that. That would just distract me. So let's move it on. Let's move it on. There we go. That'll do. So I'd probably do something like that from a cropping point of view. But yeah, it's a good shot. The other thing is, remember, whenever you're shooting something like this, when you get down lower, you're going to see more of the detail in the top. When you shoot from high, you're going to see more in the detail of the bottom, just the way the perspective happens. And one of the things, if you're going to shoot something like this, sometimes I would try and even the top and the bottom up, so you can see that the camera is not in the, like from a perspective point of view, is not in the middle. And that the reason I can see that is because you can see that the top of the water much easier than you can see the bottom of the jetty. So if you had dropped your camera down maybe 6 inches or 12 inches, it would just change that perspective a bit. The other thing I like to do with anything like this is this wood is just, the detail in it's amazing. So grab that clarity brush. Grab your clarity brush and just go nuts on the wood. You'll see it'll just do amazing things. Really bring out the detail, and it'll make people feel like they're just standing there. Just bring out the detail. Never be afraid to bring out the detail when you see wood grain or nice shells on rocks. Really, just go to town. Go to town with your clarity, and it just makes them pop. When you see those photos that have those, that look to them, and you go, wow. Quite often, this is all that's done. I used to think, what's making that photo so good? And it's just that people are really making it so you can see the detail of what you want to stand out. Now, depending on the look you're going for, you can make, like I said, more changes to those shadows and just lift them up a bit as well. I would probably just lift them up just a tad because of the highlights. And I'm just going to drop the highlights down a little bit in the background. So something like that. And I think that looks pretty good, something like that. I think the white balance is slightly out too. Don't want to go too cool. Something like that. Alright, let's have a look. Before. That's before and after. before and after. See that? Subtle changes. See removing that thing on that right pylon, the difference it makes. Now, I've done it really poorly. I would spend a lot more time removing that. And if that's something you could have removed when you took the photo, I don't know what it is. I can't really work out what it is. Then I would have done that too. But yeah, get when you've got this type of thing, get really close. Get in and get some of the detail. I mean, these bolts and stuff, they'll be old rusty bolts, and that's going to be interesting. And you don't really want any of this stuff on the outside. The interesting part of this shot is the pylons and all the rusticness of the wood and all of that. For me, anyway, that's just the way I shoot these things. In fact, I've got one myself. Let me show you, which back in my HDR nut days, that is similar. Let me have a look and see if I can find it. Oh, things have slowed down a bit on the computer again. What's going on? Let's see what I can find. But there's a jetty in, or there's a place in Sydney called La Perouse, and it's got this bridge across to a little island, and underneath it is very similar. I took a shot under that once when I was doing really getting into the HDR stuff. Oh, no, not in there. Let me have a look. I've got so many photos. I need to organise them better. I need to tag them or something in more ways. I'm terrible with organising my photos. Yeah, I can't find it. But it was very, very similar in the fact that I had shot underneath, but I got really close and I brought out all the detail and it looked really good, which is really what I like to do with those sort of things. All right. Okay. Big Oz is putting a photo in the chat box somehow. Is he? I don't know what's happening there. All right, there's been a lot of chatter going on. Wow. People are talking about cameras. Cool. You guys are just chatting amongst yourself here. Have a look. It's an inspection tag. Oh, okay. Oh, because they've inspected the jetty pylons to make sure it's good. Yeah, okay. Tim's got to go. See you, Tim. An inspection tag. Yeah, okay. So you probably don't want to be pulling that off. They might get angry at you. You might get in trouble for that. Anyway, all right. Let's jump into the last critique for today's show. Let's do it. Let's do it. Now, this one here is one from Dave Fewtrell. Now, Dave lived on the Central Coast and has now moved up to Townsville. But this is one of these examples where, if you didn't have an amazing sky, it wouldn't make much of a picture. This one is a lovely picture, lovely sky. And these are the sort of mornings that we just love. Now, couple of things going on here for me pretty quickly. There's just some blown highlights out here, so we'll come back to that in a second. Actually, let's go through the technical data, and then we'll have a look at the image. So ISO 120 millimeters. He shot this on a 20 millimeter fixed focal length lens, f11, 1/20th of a second. So all that's good. Because of the pelican in the shot, you have to do a quicker shutter speed because that's the only way you're going to grab him in a sharp way. I am going to guess that it is unlikely that if he had a graduated filter on, that it was very strong. And I don't think he had one on, to be honest with you. And the reason I say that is because there's a lot of silhouetting in the foreground that typically with a graduated filter. Now, he might have had a 0.3 on, maybe a 0.6, but I think that would be it. And the reason I say that is, like I said, there's a lot of silhouetting in the foreground. To me, and that's what... I know a lot of people say you can fix it in post-production, you can add graduated filters later on. Yeah, you can, but let me tell you that when you use them in the field, you're going to adjust the light coming in and hitting your sensor, and it means that when it comes to processing your image, in my opinion, you're going to get a raw file that's easy to work with. To me, it looks like we've lost some data here. See this on the horizon? That data just looks completely lost. So let's just jump into the develop module quickly. I think that data is lost. I don't have the raw image, of course. Yeah, like that's right on the edge of blown out, but it just looks like it's pure white. So I'd say that data has been lost through it being overexposed. And they're the sort of things you just, when you take your images, preview the RGB flashing highlights, turn that on in your camera. And the other thing you want to look at is your histogram. So if you think about this histogram up here, now this is a processed image, so we're seeing the histogram of the processed image, but in the back of the camera when you take it, if anything's bunched up all the way to the right or all the way to the left, you might have lost some detail. So it's a good time to bracket your shot or take it again. If you've got flashing highlights on and you see something flashing, that tells you that you've got a problem. Now, to fix that, all you would have to do is drop this maybe 1/3 of a stop or 2/3 of a stop, and you probably would have fixed that blown highlight. And your photo will look dark when you preview it in your screen, but you've got the magic of post-processing afterwards. So you can see, you know, I can still bring those shadows up, which I'll do in a second because I'll show you what I think could have worked better. From a composition point of view, not much I would change in this image. There's nothing too interesting going on. If it wasn't for the sky, it's not a shot you would take. I would probably crop it into more of a pano like that. Which brings more interest. Like the top of the image was doing nothing, and you know, if anything, you know, you might have found a different angle that allowed you to grab. See where this rock pool is? I have a feeling that these rocks must join the beach up here. I probably would have moved a bit to the left, used that as my leading line, those rocks of the rock pool into the sunrise. And I think that would have probably worked out a little bit better. But once again, I wasn't there, so I don't know. But that's probably what I would have done. As for the colours, I mean, this is what we get up early for. Look at the beautiful sky, the colours in the sky. And it's doing these really nice rays across these top clouds here, which is maybe why he kept this top of the image in, because it does have a few of those rays sort of up there, but I would have definitely cropped it about there. I think to me that works better. Now, putting a graduated filter in, watching out for these highlights, would mean that you'd end up with something that was probably a bit more like this, a bit more balanced. I'll just show you what I mean. I'm just going to try and emulate what I think would have happened had we have been a bit more careful with our exposure control in this shot, without it looking too unrealistic. And this will give us a bit of an idea. All right. So I think that's roughly, you know, what you would end up with. What a beautiful, vibrant morning. I haven't put any saturations or vibrance in now, and Dave probably did in his processing, but it's probably not far off what he saw. You know, it's probably something like that. Now I'll just use the before and after. So you can see that was before, that's after. So what tends to happen with a when you put a graduated filter in is the stuff in the foreground, a little bit of the detail comes out. Now I've just increased the shadow slider to emulate that, but you can sort of get the idea. You can get the idea. So I think it's always important when you're out there shooting, because to me this here is a real shame where he's lost the detail there. You know, you would never get pure white like that in the middle of this orange. It just doesn't make sense, and it is just blown highlights. So you just got to be careful. It should look more like this up here. See this up here? It should look like that, and it doesn't. And it's quite a big area of the image. So, you know, just be really careful when you're taking your photos. Check your flashing. It's the easiest thing to turn on in your camera, is those RGB flashing highlights. Have a look for it in the menu, turn it on, and after every shot, you've got the benefit of being able to preview that now. Just look at that. Now, don't rely on your preview screen though for don't rely on the preview screen for the exposure, because you can brighten or dim that preview screen, and it'll tell you a fib if you've got it set up so your preview looks vibrant or looks, you know. So you've always got to look at flashing highlights and look at your histogram if you want to get a true picture of what's going on. Just those two things will give you a true indication of what's happening. Now, John has asked, do you think it's okay to intentionally blow your highlights in a landscape image? Same goes for clipping your shadows. For an artistic effect, of course it's okay. If you mean to do it, to me, this image here, it just looks out of place. It looks like someone spilt some white out on here. You know, it's obviously totally blown out. You know, but there are times when it can work really effectively, and it's up to you to, you know, it makes you makes you think. You got to think more about it as you go through and think about your exposure. If you want to get the artistic stuff going, that's okay as well. You can put, you know, like, you know, when you're doing a portrait, sometimes they do the high key effect or whatever. You know, it depends on what you're shooting. In landscape images, it can work as well. Like if you want to get that silhouetted effect, I've seen that work really, really well. So it just depends. But in this image here, this would not be intentional. This is definitely something that's happened as a result of the exposures being a little bit out of whack. And you know, it's just a learning thing. I've done it. Everyone does it. Shooting into the sun is very, very demanding on your camera, and you need to just be aware of it. That's all. Otherwise, it's just such a great sunrise. And I know myself, in the early days, I've gone out and shot something like this, and I've gone, yeah, this is awesome. I've got it back home to my computer, and I've got all these clipped highlights everywhere, blown highlights, and I can't do anything about it, and it's really disappointing. And so, you know, I guess if I could just give you that bit of a tip, that could help. But otherwise, yeah, lovely spot, lovely sunrise. Very lucky to get such good conditions. All right. So thank you to Daniel, Brian and Dave for sending in your photos for critique. Remember, and I know some of you done it now during the show, which is cool, email me 3 images to ben@on3legs.com and I will get your photos up on the Pixel Chatter critique. The other thing to remember is to send me a picture of your kit. So as you can see, this one was sent in by Anthony today. Grab your kit, set it up nice, you know, get artsy-fartsy on your wooden floor or on your grass or something. Let's see who can take the best photo of their kit and send it in. And like I said, some of you have sent me in individual photos. What I'd rather you do is sort of try and work out how to put it like this, so we can, you know, we can have a look at your entire kit. You don't have to fit it all in. Just take a creative photo if you want. And this was inspired by the fact that my kit a few years ago ended up on ShotKit. And if you want to get an idea of some sort of inspiration of how the ShotKit site has done it, that's mine there. You'll see mine's just on my old wooden deck out the back. You know, just some of my gear. So, but he's got heaps and heaps of photographers on this site, and it's pretty cool. And I think he's always looking for photographers to submit their kit as well. So you could always go and have a look at that, and maybe you could do that for yourself. Alrighty. So let's have one last look at the chat box before we go. This is a good opportunity for you to share your social media channels with everybody else in the chat box. Alrighty. Evil Bay. Chances are Evil Bay. You guys are chatting against yourself. The histogram still lies, though, I found, because it's based on the JPEG and the contrast has often been significantly altered by camera's processing. It depends what you shoot, I think. I shoot RAW only. When you're shooting RAW, the histogram is going to tell you the truth. All the histogram is a representation of all the pixels. So I don't think it could ever lie. If you've got pixels that have been overblown, that are way too bright, then it'll be in the histogram. If they're too dark, then it'll be in the histogram. Good show yet again. Thanks, Brian. I'm glad you're enjoying it. So it's our birthday today. We just turned 21. Pixel Chatter has had 21 episodes. Can you believe that? It's pretty cool. Alrighty. Always shoot slightly underexposed to give some breathing space, Kathleen says. That's good advice. Something that I quite often do, because it's easier to fix an underexposed image than it is to fix an overexposed image, definitely. Alrighty, well, that's it for today's show. Thanks again for tuning into Pixel Chatter. As I said, send your images in, send a copy of your kit in, and of course, follow me on social media. If you're not already, head across to Facebook or Instagram. I'm on those too relatively actively. And if you're not already, you can become a VIP. To do that, go to patreon.com/on3legs with the number 3, and you can become a VIP. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next week, get out there and take some photos.